Joining me today is Tracey Hawker, whose career spans across the public sector, self-employment, and the not-for-profit sector. She recently semi-retired and is now working as a consultant for the community services sector. I've been inspired by her confident and bold leadership and her experiences at all levels of management. Tracey even had the pleasure of managing me on 2 occasions in her careers. So, Tracey, welcome to Her Secret Success. So, Tracey, welcome to Her Secret Success.
Thanks, Annette.
I'm really glad that you're here and being able to connect today. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. As you know, today is the first, my first guest episode for my first season of Her Secret Success. So it's a special occasion. You're number 1.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And it was a really lovely surprise to be asked to do this and work with you on this. So I'm looking forward to it as well.
Great. Awesome. So for the audience, the purpose of the guest interview episode is that, we're deep diving into experiences of leaders across their career. And we also put it in the context of working in toxic and or unhealthy work environments, or maybe working in environments where you can't kind of step into that feminine leader within and or keep hitting the ceiling and, asking yourselves, do I stay, do I go? That's kind of the crux of what the show is about. Mm-hmm. And in my first episode, we were talking about, the signs of toxic environment and the like. And so what I'd love to do is just kick off by starting off and looking at, the beginning of your career and asking you what inspired you, Tracey, to do the work that you do, and why is this topic so close to your heart?
Okay, then, 2 very interesting questions, Annette. So I went to university, did a humanities degree, so I did a Bachelor of Arts. I left uni and I'm not quite sure what I was going to do next. I got told by my dad getting a job was it. It had, having finished uni, it was time to go out into the real world and start, earning a living. I, like many people, had a Bachelor of Arts, which gives you a qualification in absolutely nothing. So I sat the public service exam. Don't get me wrong, I loved my arts degree. I had great fun doing it. So I sat the Commonwealth Public Service exam. And at that stage, in the APS, you had two tiers, 2 levels, depending on your level of education. So I was going to be a admin officer. Sat the exam, got a phone call saying I'd been given a job with a particular Commonwealth department, which was one of the biggest departments, and it was a dynamic department, which was great. However, the public service at the time still was governed by a variety of rules based on history, I guess you would say. It was still in the dark ages, is another way to look at it. Yeah. So all promotions and everything that you did was based on seniority. Mm-hmm. And very few women were senior. In fact, there was no senior public servants in the department that I was in. It was all males. Wow. So, whilst, a lot of us started on day one, we were all in our early 20s. Most of the clerical assistants were females, but very few of anybody in the admin services. So in the senior roles were women, and no senior officers were women. I don't think I came across any at the time. Yeah. So what did that mean? It was a bit like being asked, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I was like, I want to be the office manager. I was told that I couldn't be. that women didn't do that job.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that just made
Yeah.
me more determined that I was going
Yes.
to be. And I did. I became an office manager, not in that, both in that state and also interstate. So, yeah. Public service was an interesting place to be at that time, though. There was no sexual harassment rules. There was no equity. All of that stuff was coming in. So,
yeah.
But at the same time, there was lots of opportunities. I had the opportunity to move into I had other colleagues who had the opportunity to even work overseas because it was a Commonwealth department. So I left there. After that department closed down, I took voluntary retrenchment and parented for a while and ran my own business, and then went back into the workforce in the same type of sector, but being in the not-for-profit sector then as an operator, and quickly moved into middle management once I did go back in after parenting responsibilities, after the children had gone to school. And have just recently, like very recently, taken voluntary retrenchment for a second time. And I'm trying to work out what I'd like to be when I grow up.
That's an amazing career. And I would just want to say I'm really interested to dig in a little bit, because I think sometimes we forget how far we have come
Absolutely.
in the workplace. So, the Commonwealth sector, what was the culture like back then?
It was boys' brigade.
Yeah, right.
To the extent that the boys went to the pub on Friday lunchtime and didn't come back, and the women covered the office. And as I said before, there were two levels of operators. So you had admin officers and you had clerical assistants. So you had clerical administrative officers and clerical assistants. The clerical assistants were predominantly women. In fact, I think the office I was in only had women, and they tended to be in a fairly subservient roles. So they did your photocopying. They went out and purchased anything that needed purchasing. They opened the mail. They went and got the office manager the cups of tea. They cleaned the tea room, and they happily covered for the boys to leave the office at Friday lunchtime to go to the RSL or the bowling club and have a few beers and not come back.
Wow.
So then out of the blue, you had all these young women who started, and young men. The office I was in, we had 12 start within 2 weeks of each other. The boys were invited to go on this lunchtime thing, and the girls were left with the admin assistants.
Wow. And how did that culture make you, how did you feel in that place, in that space?
Surprised.
Okay.
Very surprised to start with that this was actually happening.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as we're talking, I can see this particular woman who was probably then the age I am now. She would have been coming to the end of her career. And when we sort of went, what's going on? And she's like, well, that's your job. You had women that had just finished high school, done their uni degrees, and went, this is not our job and we are not doing this. No. Okay. I hadn't grown up in an environment that I had any form of discrimination or exclusion, probably is a better way to say it. I'd grown up in a household where my mother was in a management position. My mother travelled for work. Education was encouraged. It didn't cross my mind that this could or would happen. It was quite confronting. But given the way I had been brought up, which was to take the bull by the horns, so to speak, I couldn't help but actively encourage my female colleagues to come to the club as well because, hey, there's nothing to say that we couldn't go.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
the RSL, of course we could go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we did. It wasn't very well received, but we did. We went. Yeah, we went.
You
Yeah,
still won.
yeah, we still went. But I mean, it wasn't just that was interesting. It was right. It was rife right the way through. There was no sexual harassment policies in place because it wasn't sexual harassment. Actually, wasn't something that was recognised within Australian workplaces at that stage. It was rife.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite. It was accepted behaviour with senior male staffs to intimidate the junior girls. When it did finally come in, we all were called into a room and we had sexual harassment training.
Wow. Yeah.
And what that involved was being told what the changes to legislation was going to be, and people were asked to share any experiences they'd had. So I remember doing it. I shared an experience that I'd had, and the perpetrator was sitting in the chair next to me. He left and he never came back, but nobody asked him where he'd gone.
Yeah.
Because supposedly he was found not guilty of sexual harassment. He couldn't be guilty of sexual harassment because his wife had just had a baby.
Wow. Yeah. It's hard to imagine now, right?
Yeah, it is. It is hard to imagine, but it was pretty rife, and it was in a lot of cases quite. You were seen as being overly sensitive, and if you came back fighting, you were overly aggressive.
Yeah.
Now, not being a sensitive soul, I tended to be an aggressive soul, I guess. Although anybody who's ever worked with me would never say that about me.
Never.
No. But even that concept is quite interesting in that if you're standing up for your rights, it's seen as being aggressive as opposed to assertive. It's that age-old, that debate that happens there. So anyway, so I was in public service. So I ended up in a management position, a fairly senior role. I got told when I got asked for, because you had to have referees that were internal to the public service at the stage. So they changed the rules, and it wasn't based on. It was now based on seniority. Sorry, it wasn't based on seniority, i.e. length of time in the job. It was based on competency, and I decided to apply for an assistant office manager's job. I was told, quite honestly, I wasn't going to get it. I wasn't going to get it. One, I wasn't old enough, and two, I was a woman.
Yeah.
So I went, well, I'm going to apply for it. So I did, and I got it.
You got it.
And I got it.
Congratulations.
And then it just kept happening. I guess what do you call it? The wheels were changing, and it was happening across the board. And so I ended up being the youngest office manager in New South Wales. When I came from New South Wales over to Western Australia, I ended up being headhunted and asked to take out one of the country regions, which wasn't just the office. It was a couple of offices, a couple of program areas, and was incredibly interesting because it was something I hadn't done before. And so the tide turned, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kind of touched on what some of the cost it cost you, both personally and professionally. But I'd like to explore that a little bit more. So what was the cost for you to be a manager, to be in management?
Well, you couldn't just be able to do your job. You couldn't be as good as. You had to be better. There was no room for error. You had to be spot on. And I think that then becomes a learned behaviour. And then that is something that follows you right the way through, that you cannot just be able to be good at your job. You've probably got to be the best. Is that something that's expected of you? Would that have been expected of me up until recently? Probably not, but I therefore expected it of myself. It had become that learned behaviour over a period of time to have very high expectations of performance. And it's quite interesting, having left a position recently, that the position I was doing ended up being carved up between 3 people once I'd gone.
Oh, I know that. I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So definitely that, I think as women, we often will take on so much more in our role. And
Absolutely.
And often the organisations aren't putting that expectation on themselves, that we are putting that on ourselves to constantly, like you said, achieve higher and better and better. And then you set the norm, that becomes the standard, and then
It becomes the standard, yes.
And then you've got to achieve more and more. So the fact that your role then needed to be divided up into 3 roles says something in that space too.
Yeah, and as you said, is it something that the organisation puts on, or is it you put it on yourself? Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
If you are a high achiever, if you like to achieve a certain standard, you achieve it, and then it's like, oh, well, we've just got this out of her. What's the next benchmark? What can she do next? What else can we get? And look, that feeds. That's flattering. It feeds the ego. We've all got egos. Anybody who tells you they don't have an ego is rubbish. We all have egos, and it does feed it. It's flattering, but it's also exhausting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what came next after your career in the Commonwealth?
Oh, then I decided to, I wandered off to have a couple of children. So I had children, and then I started running my own business for a while. I ran a consultancy, 2 businesses at once. I ran a consultancy and also a family daycare business. So I did the 2 concurrently, like nothing. So the consultancy was community consultancy. And I did some work for a couple of shires when they were trying to reinvent themselves, building development companies that were doing community consultations on redeveloping areas. It was at a time when the internet had come in. You had good old dial-up at home. We'd started to get mobile.
I remember, yes.
Yeah, that lovely noise, ding, 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 or whatever it was. Yeah. And then I'd lose it with one of the kids if they decided to make a phone call to their friend at the same time while I was busy doing something. Right. But it started that whole first of like, hey, you can work from home and have children. You can fit this in. Really, all that meant was you were doing 2 jobs. I was full-time house looking. And if I cast my mind back, I can see myself, because, as I said, mobile phones had just come. I had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and I had them in the trolley in the supermarket, and this phone rang. And it was somebody to do with this community consultation I was doing for the land developers. But here I was, and now it would be normal, but of course it would be the norm. It wasn't the norm there. Here am I in the supermarket with 2 kids in a trolley doing the grocery shopping, and I'm on a phone. I mean, it was unheard of, but it was doable.
Yeah.
And it was exciting.
Yeah.
Because it was new. It was exciting. Now it's like, oh gosh, that wretched thing's ringing yet again. Don't they ever leave me alone? But it was pretty unheard of. So it was exciting times. Being able to
you sound like you really loved that time in your career as well. What was it that you really loved about it?
The flexibility that you could parent, and you could parent, you could still be connected to community, you could be running your own show. Yeah.
So,
And then back into the
yeah.
community services sector.
Oh, nice transition there, nice segue. Because I
Mm.
was going to say, tell me about then what it was like for you returning to employment. What are some of the challenges that you overcame as you returned to work?
Having 100 balls in the air at any given time.
Yeah, yeah.
Having 3 children, all of one was in high school, 2 were in primary school, meeting organisational expectation, even going for the job. So whilst I had been a Commonwealth public servant, then I'd seen this job advertised, and I mean, gosh, I can't remember the year it was, you might, because I think we went for the same job, and we actually met in the waiting room of the
It was
interview.
about 2001,
It
maybe?
was something like
Yeah,
that,
something
wasn't it?
like that.
Yeah.
2001, 2002. Yeah.
Mm. And what, yeah, so, you've got 3 children, you've got all these balls up in the air. I was struggling to get a referee. I rang the state manager, the department that I worked with.
Yeah.
Now, I'd only been out of the workforce, must have been 5 years. Yeah, my daughter was 5 by that stage, 5 years. And he was reluctant to give me a ref. And I went, what? Are you serious?
Yeah.
Like, I had flown from a country location, heavily pregnant. I delivered on every deliverable that you ever needed. What do you think has maybe happened to me in 5 years? In fact, I've probably juggled more balls in 5 years than you've ever juggled in your life. And now you're going, oh, I haven't worked with you for a while. Yeah. That was a real shock, actually. That was a big shock to have that kind of door close. I did not expect that to happen at all. Being fairly outspoken, I can remember, his name was Jeff, I can remember saying, oh, thanks for nothing, Jeff, bye, and hanging up the phone. He rang me back later and said, I've thought about it, I'll do it. Like,
Thank you.
Yes, I wanted to say, kill me now, don't do anything.
Thanks.
I didn't. I smiled and said,
of course.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. But that's, and that, in retrospect, that's something, and that was only after 5 years. And I was going actually back into the same sector. I was looking at jobs funded by the same department that I'd left in a leadership role, and I was going to try and ask for an operator's role. And the fellow running the organisation I was going for, I had him as a colleague. I guess that's being kind. I'd sort of had him as a colleague at the time, and he wasn't highly thought of. And I'm like having to prove myself, and I'm like, gosh. So, like if you had been if it had been in much longer than that, it would have been pretty much impossible to get back into it. And that would have been. So again, you're in this position. It doesn't matter what your runs on the board have been. You're almost thankful that you've been given this opportunity to come back in, and you're not just doing what you're employed to do, but you're doing above and beyond. You're proving yourself. You're proving that because you've still got 1 sitting in primary school or 2 in primary school, and because you're a mother, you're proving that you're not letting the team down, and you're not, so if you ask my children, they'd say that they spent lots of time sitting under the tree waiting to be picked up from primary school because I forgot them or I was running late. So they probably, a couple of times I think the gardener from school took them home. That was interesting. But it's because you're trying to make the expectation of the organisation and keep proving yourself that you are valued, you're valuable.
And that's exhausting. It's tiring. It's very exhausting. So I know that throughout your career, you have had times when you've experienced toxic or unhealthy work environments. So, talk to us about that a little bit. Perhaps maybe what were the signs, or what was your experience of being in that toxicity?
I think toxicity, gosh, that's fun to get your tongue around, isn't it?
I wanted to throw that out there just for you.
It has the potential to always be in there. It doesn't matter whether it's the public sector, the private sector, the not-for-profit. It's part of human nature. And then it becomes down to how is it managed?
Yeah.
Because, a lot of us are competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're managing contracts that come from government, they are competitive. You are audited. You've got to keep them at a particular standard. If you don't get the next contract, all of that kind of stuff. And therefore, within the management team, what tends to happen is you don't work as a team. You end up in this, without even realizing you're part of it as well, that you end up as part of this competitive or combative,
Even maybe.
It is. You're actually in combat against your colleagues when you should be working together. Is it deliberate within the organisation? The organisations I were in, I would say no, it wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't necessarily checked when it started to occur.
Yeah.
Was it recognised? If it was recognised, as I say, maybe it was ignored. So if it was seen, it wasn't brought back into line. And then the risk is that becomes the culture of the organisation.
Yeah. Yes, because culture comes from leadership.
Because it's ignored.
Ignored, yeah, and not changed, not held accountable. There's no, in that toxic environment, the lack of accountability is it's kind of like an accountability, like you're saying, for performance, but not necessarily an accountability for the kind of culture that is being created.
And I mean, there's always capacity, like things like would be, you can do your surveys, you can find out what people think. And as you say, you can ask those questions at performance appraisals, at discussion. But if then the information that's received, nothing is actually done with it.
Yes.
It's like, what's the point?
Yeah. We both know the toll that a toxic environment can have on our health and well-being. So out of your experiences, what would be, your key learnings for, I guess, for your own well-being in that space, in that situation?
Look after your health and well-being, because no one else is going to.
Yes, that's
to be honest.
Yeah.
And I have, I would say this, I've seen young women coming up, like through the ranks, and whilst they will give extra, they will give up their time, they tend to have better boundaries than probably I would have. As I said, going right back to the beginning, it wasn't necessarily something that was asked of me by the organisation, but because I kept giving it, because probably because of that introduction to the workplace and knowing that I couldn't be as good, I had to be better. So you keep giving more and you keep giving more, and then that becomes the expected level of performance for you.
Yes. Exactly.
So anything less than that, even if it's not the norm, it's the expected level for you. Anything less than that becomes a drop in performance, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. So for the audience that are watching on at the moment, what mindset or leadership shift helped you to go from surviving to thriving? What mindset needed to change for you, or what mindset changed for you?
when I realised there wasn't a single position in the company that I hadn't actually held.
Yeah.
I had not just held one of the positions, I had, in some instances, actually started them off from scratch. I had to remind myself that working at the company, I'd actually been headhunted across. So that in itself, it had happened with other people. I headhunted you, for example.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm not, that I wasn't responsible for the entire culture of the organisation. You're only responsible for your part of it.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I could honestly say hand in heart that I was able to try and control that within my section, couldn't help what happened in other sections. Um, and hey, there were times then it was toxic within my own section. You're working with human beings, and it's whether or not you allow that toxicity to continue as a leader,
Yeah.
or whether it's nipped in the bud. And that doesn't matter whether it's operational staff, supervisors, or yourself.
May I ask you
Yeah.
when did you feel most in survival mode?
This year, as I say, twice. I said to you what it was like working at the public service when I first started my career. Um, that was so there'd be those three elements. Starting and having to deal with that was more of an eye opener. What an introduction to the world of work. The second time was coming back off maternity leave and going in and thinking, wow, I don't even have what I need to be able to do my job, and nobody's telling me what my job. And then last year, coming back, I had 6 months off work due to ill health, and I came back, and my return to work was poorly managed. Well, it wasn't managed. And the person who'd been doing the job while I was away was left to provide the handover. It just wasn't facilitated. And I guess I was fortunate enough for my own career planning that I could sit there and go, do you know, I'm not sure whether I want to do this. I no longer was in a position that I had, school fees to pay, mortgages to pay, whatever. My only concern was I'm not going to have a car. That was it. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
So I just sort of went, do you know, I don't think I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Which after 18 years is a fairly a difficult decision to come to. You're not quite sure whether or not, and then you enter in, well, what am I going to do if I'm not doing this?
Yes.
I'm still asking myself that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that space, what emotions kind of come up for you in that space of when you're in survival mode?
That you're constantly looking over your shoulder, that you're wondering if you're even competent anymore. That was probably the biggest. Am I still competent? Can I still do this? How do I still do this? And they're all real emotions. That they would be the main ones. Am I competent?
Yeah.
Can I still do this? And do I still have value is probably the other one. Do I still have value?
I can so resonate with that. Yeah.
And then I guess you, in that process, come back and have to ask yourself, do I even want to do it? That's probably the one that when you go through all of this thing, do I have value? Am I competent, etc.? And if you're answering yes to all of this, I'm like, do I even want to do this? And do I have to do it? Now, I was lucky enough to be in a financial position that I could make those choices. Not everybody is within that.
Through that process, you were kind of, should I stay, should I go? And then
Absolutely.
for you, it was, as you're processing the emotions, it was also the values alignment. All of that helped to inform that decision.
And was
Yeah,
anything going to change within the
that's
organisation? Did I have a belief anything was going to change?
yeah.
And the conclusion I came to was it may, but if it did, it probably wasn't going to be a long-term change. It would go back, and I would be as guilty of that as anything else. I'm not saying everything's the organisation because you're part of the organisation.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
that potentially what could happen was you end up very quickly the old patterns would come back in. They would change for a short space and then the old patterns would come back into play. And I was like, there's nothing wrong. I think that's probably also something to look at. There's nothing wrong with walking away.
Yes, that's
There's
right.
nothing wrong with saying, this is not for me.
Yes, absolutely. So
And some of your viewers might be
yeah,
sitting there going,
absolutely.
well, it's all right for her. She's got the luxury of
Mm,
doing that.
mm,
And I freely say that.
mm.
When I had, 3 children at school and I'm paying school fees, etc., I didn't have that freedom, but I do now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
But I still did have the freedom to change jobs,
Mhm.
which is when I went from the previous organisation
Mm,
to this one.
mm. Yeah, yeah. Yes, there's still, it is, even if the answer is, okay, I might not be able to go yet, what's my exit strategy and what does that look like? Sometimes it might
Mm-hmm.
not be something you feel you can do immediately, but you've got some kind of plan or idea and it doesn't,
Yeah.
you
Whether
might
it
go
be
into business, you might go into another leadership, you could completely
a
change
different
your career.
company, a
Yeah.
sideways move within the organisation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Tracey, tell me how did you work through those emotions?
Um, Not alone. That would probably
Mm,
be the best thing to say. Don't feel like you have to do it alone. Obviously, some time to think by yourself is essential. I mean, there's some standard practices, your good old pros and cons kind of lists, all of that kind of stuff. Um, but when you've been with a company a long time, I think the other thing to remember is you don't have to make an overnight decision.
no.
You
Yes.
can actually and talk to people.
Mm,
So, you know, um, talk to a coach,
mm,
talk to friends, talk to family, talk
mm,
to who you feel comfortable with.
yeah.
I spoke to a coach to try and make that decision.
Mm,
They came up with things that I hadn't thought of, and um, and I think the process of making that decision, it wasn't a knee jerk. It was a
mm,
long process.
mm,
I was quite adamant I wanted to go back, but I think the whole process took me about five or so months,
mm.
which is okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that you're making the space for it. Doesn't, like you said, doesn't have to be an immediate. It might be. It might very well call, if that's how you are. If as you're going through that process, if you decide I'm done and you just draw a line in the sand and you're gone.
Mm,
But it's recognizing that if you can't do that, or if you don't feel like that's an option for you, that you can take that time and get the support and process and work that through. So
absolutely. And
yeah,
you have the right as well. I mean, it depends on what's available within the company, of course.
yeah,
Whether or not there's some sideways moves, changes, is there some other options?
mm-hmm.
And you said earlier when we were talking, it's about having that plan for yourself
Yeah,
rather than feeling like you're being carried along
yes,
and
yeah,
the journey is happening and it's happening whether or not you want it to or not. Yeah, that may end up being the case.
yes, yeah,
But
mm,
ultimately, this is your life. This is yours. As I
mm,
said, if you like when I had kids, if you've got school fees to pay or a mortgage, you've
mm,
got financial commitments. That means to say you can't just jump ship.
mm,
Then so be it.
yes,
So
yeah,
what does it look like then if you stay?
mm,
And what do you need?
mm-hmm,
And I think people forget that with staff appraisals as well. Um, Now, it's a two-way process. It's not just about
Yeah.
HR or your manager coming in and sitting you down and going, well, Annette, you're good at this, 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 and this. This is a gap. You need to address it. It's a two-way process. It's
Mm,
also, where do you fit into the organisation? How do you fit into the organisation?
mm,
And what do you need to do your job? And
mm,
what do you need to feel comfortable in your workplace so you can do your job? Like, how do the pieces fit together?
mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. So we've kind of covered a little bit of this where I was going to ask you what advice you would give women who feel stuck and aren't sure where to start. So I might say that question along with, is there anything that you feel like you haven't said about any advice? If a woman's stuck in that environment and they're not sure where to start, is there any final advice or thoughts about that?
Leave it until you're at breaking point,
Mm,
because how you articulate yourself at that stage is not going to be a logical discussion.
yeah, yeah,
That
great
would be,
advice. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Okay, Tracy. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. So are you ready?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. All right, so the first one is one belief that completely changed your life.
Ooh, okay. Competence isn't about perfection.
Mhm.
You do not have to be perfect, but you do have to give it a go. And by giving it a go, you become competent.
I love that. Wow, that's powerful. Yes, I absolutely love that. So my second one is your go-to confidence mantra.
Give it a go, girl.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Give it a go. Love it. Okay, the next one. The boldest decision you've ever made as a leader.
I guess last year, to
Hmm.
realize that my values didn't align. I could still do the job, I could do it well, but my values were no longer, and I've done this twice.
Hmm.
Okay. Once when I worked in government, and more recently, that my values no longer aligned with the organisation that I was working for and the role that I was in, and basically going, okay, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Very, very powerful. Okay, so a book or quote or a person who had the biggest impact on you.
Paul Keating.
Yes,
Paul Keating. Yeah, he did.
and
Yeah.
why is that?
He was dynamic. He was, I guess, he was a bit of a larrikin. He was prepared to stand up and be counted and say what he thought. He also came from the same part of New South Wales that I went to school in. So he was very much a working class
Mhm.
boy.
Mm.
He made it up through the ranks, which I admire. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really powerful. I love those little moments just to sort of give us a little bit of a final wrap up for our session today. So I just wanted to say, I wanted to thank you, Tracy, for being here as my very first guest speaker for her
Thank
season.
you for asking me.
It's been awesome, and I've loved your experiences. Thank you very much for I value that you've shared some very personal moments in your career and in your personal life, and those insights are truly inspirational. So thank you so much for being who you are. And I want to wish you all the success in your semi-retirement.
Thank you. And thanks for the invitation to be on your show and
Yeah.
to be your first speaker. That's an honour.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Annette.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye bye.
There were so many golden nuggets in today's episode, but if there's just one takeaway I want you to hold on to, it's this. No matter what situation or circumstance you're in at this moment, Trust yourself and remember, you've got this, girl. And if this conversation spoke to your heart, go back and watch our previous episode where we explored breaking free from toxic environments. It'll give you an even deeper insight into this breakthrough. So thanks for joining me for this episode of Her Secret Success. Until next time, remember, your success was never meant to be hidden. It was always meant to shine.